There is a side of Judaism that remains veiled, mysterious, profound, and often misunderstood. It is a sacred current that flows beneath the surface of Jewish rituals, scriptures, and symbols. This is Jewish mysticism, the hidden dimension of one of the world's oldest spiritual traditions. To the average Christian, Judaism is often seen as a religion of laws, festivals, and Old Testament narratives. But behind the visible framework of commandments and customs lies a deep reservoir of spiritual insight, a mystical tradition that explores the nature of God, the soul, the universe, and the purpose of existence. Jewish mysticism is not a modern invention. It is not a fringe doctrine or the product of theological speculation. It is an ancient spiritual science, passed down in secret, nurtured in the silence of caves, whispered in sacred gatherings, and written in coded texts. It is the hidden heartbeat of Judaism, known by names like Kabbalah, Merkava mysticism, and Hasidic ecstasy. For centuries, this knowledge was reserved for a select few, sages, scholars, and spiritual seekers who had prepared themselves through years of study, purity, and deep devotion. It was hidden not out of elitism, but out of reverence. The truths within Jewish mysticism are powerful. They are transformative. They reveal not just facts about God, but pathways to encounter Him. Why has this mystical tradition remained largely unknown to Christians? The reasons are many. Historical separation, theological disagreements, cultural misunderstandings, and even fear of mysticism have contributed to a wide spiritual gap. But in recent decades, that veil has begun to lift. More seekers, both Jewish and non-Jewish, are turning toward the mystical dimensions of faith, not to abandon their beliefs, but to deepen them. This audiobook is not a scholarly treatise. It is a spiritual discourse, a guided exploration into the hidden side of Judaism that Christians and spiritual seekers often overlook. It will take you into the heart of the Zohar, the ancient mystical commentary on the Torah. It will introduce you to the Tree of Life, a divine map of creation and the soul. It will unveil teachings about the infinite nature of God, Ein Sof, the purpose of human suffering, reincarnation, sacred time, the mystical power of Hebrew letters, and the hidden sparks of light scattered across the universe. Jewish mysticism is not content with intellectual stimulation, it calls the soul into alignment, into union, into transformation. It teaches that every human is a microcosm of the divine pattern. That every action has cosmic consequences. That the spiritual world is as real, if not more real, than the material one. To the Christian listener, this exploration may challenge familiar categories. You may encounter teachings that seem foreign, symbols that feel esoteric, or ideas that stir both curiosity and caution. That is to be expected. Mysticism is not comfortable, it is expansive. It is the path of those who desire not just to believe in God, but to experience God. This audiobook invites you to listen not just with your mind, but with your heart. Lay aside assumptions. Open your inner eyes. Allow the ancient Jewish mystics to guide you into dimensions of truth that transcend religion, race, and ritual. For in the end, all genuine mysticism points to the same divine reality, the one who is beyond name, beyond form, yet intimately present in all things. Welcome to Jewish mysticism, the hidden secrets Christians were never told. Written and published by the Zillion Pro. Chapter 1. The Origins of Jewish Mysticism. Jewish mysticism did not begin with Kabbalah. It did not spring up suddenly in the Middle Ages, nor was it created in response to outside spiritual traditions. Its roots reach back thousands of years, to the very foundations of Jewish faith, and even deeper, to humanity's primal longing to encounter the divine. From the beginning, Judaism was more than a religion of laws, it was a spiritual path of direct relationship with God. Abraham, the patriarch of the Jewish people, is not remembered merely for his obedience but for his intimate walk with God. The prophets of Israel did not only proclaim judgment and justice, they saw visions, heard divine voices, and stood in awe before the mysteries of heaven. The earliest books of the Hebrew Bible are filled with accounts of dreams, theophanies, angelic visitations, divine fire, and sacred encounters. These were not just historical records, they were mystical experiences. The mystical seeds in the Hebrew scriptures. Take Moses, for example. His journey begins with a burning bush and continues to include direct conversations with God on Mount Sinai. He spends 40 days in divine presence so intense that his face radiates light upon his return. In Exodus 24, we are told that 70 elders of Israel saw the God of Israel and described the pavement of sapphire beneath his feet. These are mystical moments, experiences beyond reason, grounded not in theology but in spiritual encounter. The prophet Ezekiel, too, offers one of the most iconic mystical visions in Jewish scripture. In Ezekiel chapter 1, he sees wheels within wheels, living creatures with many faces, and a radiant throne above them. This vision became the foundation of what is known as Merkava mysticism, the earliest formal stream of Jewish mystical thought. Merkava means chariot, and refers to Ezekiel's divine vision of the heavenly throne. 4 generations after Ezekiel, Jewish mystics attempted to ascend spiritually through meditation, purity, and contemplation to ride the chariot and reach the divine throne room. The era of hidden mystics. By the Second Temple period, roughly 516 BCE to 70 CE, mystical practices became more structured and secretive. Influenced by both internal spiritual development and the surrounding mystical cultures of Babylon, Persia, and Hellenistic Greece, certain Jewish sages began to explore deeper cosmologies. Texts such as the Book of Enoch, Sefer Yetzirah, the Book of Formation, and the Hekalit literature, describing spiritual palaces of heaven, began to circulate in select circles. These writings contained descriptions of the heavenly realms, angelic hierarchies, the divine name, and techniques for spiritual ascent. They were not shared widely. In fact, rabbinic warnings abounded. 4 entered the paths, mystical garden of divine knowledge, but only 1 came out in peace. These teachings were seen as powerful and dangerous, able to elevate or destroy depending on the soul's purity and intent. Mysticism and the rabbis of the Talmud. Even within the rabbinic period, when Jewish law was being codified in the Mishnah and Talmud, there were rabbis who were deeply mystical. Rabbi Akiva, one of the most revered sages in Jewish history, was said to have entered the mystical paths and emerged unharmed. He taught about divine love, the hidden meanings of Torah, and the presence of God in every detail of creation. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, another Talmudic-era figure, is traditionally credited with authoring the Zohar, the central text of Kabbalistic thought. Whether he was the literal author or the mystical inspiration for later writings, the legends surrounding him speak of a man who lived in caves, communed with angels, and explored the secret dimensions of the Torah while in spiritual seclusion. The secret chain of transmission. What kept Jewish mysticism alive was not public teaching, but oral transmission, a whispered tradition passed from master to disciple, from heart to heart. Much like the oral Torah, Jewish mysticism was handed down in sacred trust. Only the spiritually mature, morally disciplined, and intellectually capable were allowed to delve into its depths. This secrecy was not meant to exclude, but to protect. The mystical teachings were regarded as a kind of spiritual fire, they could illuminate or consume. The sages understood that knowledge without wisdom, or power without humility, could lead not to enlightenment, but to delusion, pride, or even madness. As a result, Jewish mysticism developed in the shadows of Jewish life, never completely hidden, yet never fully exposed. It was woven into prayer, concealed in commentary, hinted at in rituals, and encoded in the Hebrew language itself. Mysticism is the heart of Judaism. For the Jewish mystic, everything in Judaism points beyond itself. The Torah is not just law, it is a spiritual map. The commandments, mitzvot, are not merely religious duties, they are cosmic acts that align the human soul with divine order. The Hebrew letters are not just linguistic symbols, they are vibrations of divine energy. The Sabbath is not just a day of rest, it is a portal to eternity. While much of mainstream Judaism emphasizes external observance, mysticism turns inward. It asks not only, What must I do, but what is the inner meaning of what I do? It invites the seeker to go beyond form into essence, from outer law to inner light, from belief to direct knowing. Why Christians have missed the mystical heart of Judaism. Many Christians view the Old Testament as a precursor to the New, and Judaism as a legalistic or incomplete system. But this view often misses the depth and mystery embedded within Jewish tradition. The mystical side of Judaism shows that long before the birth of Christ, Jewish seekers were already exploring themes that resonate with Christian mystics: union with God, the transformation of the soul, divine love, and spiritual rebirth. Ironically, some of the deepest Christian mystical teachings, those of Meister Eckhart, Teresa of Avila, or John of the Cross, echo truths long held in Jewish mysticism. Yet most Christians remain unaware of the spiritual river from which these streams may have flowed. Understanding Jewish mysticism does not threaten Christian faith. On the contrary, it enriches it. It reveals a shared hunger, a common spiritual ancestry, and a universal longing to ascend to the divine. It reminds us that before religion divided people, mysticism united them, in silence, awe, and sacred wonder. In the chapters ahead, we will begin to explore the structures and symbols that form the mystical core of Judaism. We will look at Kabbalah, the Tree of Life, the Sefirot, the Zohar, divine names, and spiritual practices developed over centuries. But it all begins here, with the recognition that Jewish mysticism is not new, not foreign, and not a contradiction to faith. It is the ancient soul of a spiritual tradition that still speaks to all who seek the divine. Let us now turn to the gateway of all Jewish mysticism, the Kabbalah. Chapter 2. The Kabbalah, Judaism's esoteric soul. When people hear the word Kabbalah, they often think of red string bracelets, celebrities, or secret doctrines whispered behind closed doors. But beyond the mystique and popular misconceptions lies a profound and sacred spiritual system, a wisdom tradition rooted deeply in Jewish thought and scripture. Kabbalah, meaning received tradition or that which is received, is the name given to the esoteric teachings of Judaism. It is not a separate religion or a mystical cult, but rather the inner dimension of the Jewish faith, a lens through which the Torah, the universe, and the soul are viewed as deeply interconnected and alive with divine meaning. The emergence of Kabbalah. While mystical traditions in Judaism existed long before the term Kabbalah was used, it wasn't until the 12th and 13th centuries in southern France and Spain that Kabbalah emerged as a distinct and codified system. This period saw the appearance of major mystical schools, culminating in the creation of the Zohar, the foundational text of Kabbalah, traditionally attributed to Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai. But Kabbalah wasn't invented, it was revealed, as its practitioners would say. It represented the flowering of centuries of hidden teachings that had been passed down from generation to generation, now expressed in new language, symbols, and cosmological frameworks. It was an unveiling of the inner secrets of Torah that had always been present, but not yet articulated in full. What is Kabbalah really about? At its core, Kabbalah is a map of divine reality. It seeks to answer the most fundamental spiritual questions: who or what is God? Why was the universe created? What is the human soul, and what is its purpose? How do good and evil coexist? How can the finite connect with the infinite? Unlike theology, which defines doctrines and dogmas, Kabbalah provides mystical structures and symbolic language to explore these questions through contemplation, meditation, and experiential insight. Its aim is not merely to understand God intellectually, but to unite with the divine, to experience God as the root and reality of all that exists. The Tree of Life, the blueprint of existence. One of Kabbalah's central teachings is the Tree of Life, a mystical diagram composed of 10 emanations, known as the Sefirot. These 10 Sefirot are not parts of God but are modes of divine expression and manifestation. Through them, the infinite God, Ein Sof, interacts with the created world. The 10 Sefirot are: 1. Keter, crown. Divine will, the highest point of intention. 2. Chokmah, wisdom. The seed of intuitive insight. 3. Binah, understanding. The womb of contemplation and analysis. 4. Chesed, loving kindness, overflowing grace and generosity. 5. Gevurah, severity, discipline, judgment, and boundaries. 6. Tiferet, beauty, harmony, balance, and compassion. 7. Netzach, victory, endurance and ambition. 8. Hod, glory, surrender, humility, and resonance. 9. Yesod, foundation, connection, transmission, and flow. 10. Malkut, kingdom, manifestation, presence, and the physical world. Together, these Sefirot form a spiritual anatomy, not only of God's interaction with creation, but also of the human soul. The Tree of Life is both cosmic and personal. It mirrors the structure of heaven and the inner dimensions of our own being. Ein Sof, the infinite God beyond form. One of the most radical ideas in Kabbalah is the concept of Ein Sof, which means without end. Ein Sof refers to the absolute, infinite aspect of God, beyond name, beyond thought, beyond comprehension. Unlike the personal God often described in scripture, Ein Sof cannot be defined. It is the limitless source of all that exists, and all that exists flows from it. Creation, in the Kabbalistic view, is not something that happened once. It is a continuous unfolding of divine energy from the infinite into the finite. To make space for creation, the Ein Sof performed an act known as Tzimtzum, a self-contraction. In this mysterious process, God withdrew himself to create an empty space where creation could emerge. This concept teaches that divine concealment is not absence, it is the condition that makes free will and independent existence possible. The purpose of creation according to Kabbalah. Kabbalah teaches that the world was not created randomly or for mere survival. The purpose of creation is tikkun, the repair and restoration of divine unity. At the moment of creation, divine light became shattered, and sparks of holiness were scattered throughout the physical world. These sparks lie hidden in people, objects, and moments. Every act of kindness, every prayer, every mitzvah, commandment, and every conscious deed becomes an opportunity to gather and elevate these sparks, bringing light back to its source. Thus, life is not just a journey, it is a sacred mission. The inner Torah, hidden meanings beneath the surface. To the Kabbalist, the Torah is not just a legal or historical text, it is a living, multidimensional code. Every letter, every word, even every crown on a letter, contains layers of hidden meaning. Kabbalists use interpretive tools such as gematria, numerical values of Hebrew letters to uncover deeper meanings, noterican, acronyms and abbreviations to reveal concealed teachings, temira, letter substitution to find new words and insights. Through these methods, what seems ordinary is revealed as extraordinary. The Torah becomes a mystical document, a direct communication from the infinite clothed in language, waiting to be decoded by the awakened soul. The danger and discipline of Kabbalah. Because of its power, Kabbalah has traditionally been restricted to mature students, usually Jewish men over the age of 40 who were well versed in the Torah and Talmud. The fear was not elitism, but protection. The mystical path is not for the careless or the curious, it is for the committed. Engaging with Kabbalah without proper grounding can lead to spiritual imbalance, delusion, or confusion. That is why traditional teachers always emphasized humility, ethical living, and deep Torah study as prerequisites for mystical exploration. Kabbalah and the Christian seeker. For the Christian listener, many of these ideas may seem both foreign and familiar. Concepts such as divine unity, spiritual ascent, inner transformation, and hidden meaning in scripture are deeply resonant with Christian mysticism. In fact, many early Christian mystics unknowingly echoed Kabbalistic themes, and some Renaissance Christian scholars openly studied the Kabbalah, seeing in it a key to understanding Christ's mission. But it is important to approach Kabbalah not as a Christian reinterpretation of Judaism, but as an ancient Jewish path to divine encounter. It is not a supplement to Christian theology, but a window into a sacred tradition that predates and parallels Christianity in profound ways. Conclusion: a living path to the divine. Kabbalah is not just a mystical curiosity, it is the soul of Judaism. It is a living path that reveals the unseen forces shaping reality and offers the seeker a way to participate in divine purpose. It is both mystical map and moral compass, teaching that love, justice, and holiness are not merely spiritual ideals but tools of cosmic repair. Remember, Kabbalah is not just information, it is transformation. It is meant to be lived, not just learned. May this journey awaken within you the hidden spark that longs for the light. Chapter 3. The Zohar, the mystical Torah. The Zohar is the crown jewel of Jewish mysticism. Shrouded in mystery, cloaked in symbolic language, and revered as the soul of the Torah, the Zohar is not merely a book, it is an experience, a spiritual world unto itself. To the Kabbalist, the Zohar is what the Torah becomes when it is read not with the eyes, but with the soul. What is the Zohar? The word Zohar means radiance or splendor in Hebrew. It is a mystical commentary on the Torah, but it is unlike any other. While traditional commentaries focus on law, grammar, or narrative clarification, the Zohar penetrates to the spiritual essence of the scripture. It sees the Bible not just as history or ethics, but as a cosmic code, a divine revelation of spiritual processes unfolding across every level of existence. The Zohar is a sprawling, poetic, and often cryptic work. It weaves together interpretations of scripture, stories of spiritual masters, cosmological teachings, mystical visions, and meditations on the nature of God, the soul, good and evil, light and darkness. Its language is primarily Aramaic, the common tongue of ancient Jewish sages, but its symbolism transcends linguistic boundaries. Who wrote the Zohar? The authorship of the Zohar is one of its great mysteries. Tradition attributes the text to Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, a 2nd century sage and mystic who, according to legend, fled Roman persecution and lived in a cave for 13 years with his son, sustained by miraculous provision and divine revelations. In the cave, he was said to have received the secrets of the Torah from the prophet Elijah and composed the Zohar under divine inspiration. This legend is beloved by mystics and gives the Zohar its spiritual authority within the tradition. However, modern scholarship generally attributes the compilation of the Zohar to Moses de Leon, a 13th century Spanish Jewish mystic. Some scholars believe that he composed the Zohar himself, drawing on older mystical traditions, while others argue he was merely a transmitter of an ancient oral teaching. Regardless of who physically wrote it, the spiritual essence of the Zohar transcends its historical origin. For those who study it, the text is alive, sacred, and divinely inspired. The structure and style of the Zohar. The Zohar is not a systematic theological treatise. It is more like a mystical tapestry, woven with layers of symbolism, allegory, and allusion. Its primary structure follows the weekly Torah portions, Perashot, but within those sections, it includes midrashic storytelling, mystical tales involving Rabbi Shimon and his circle of disciples. Sod-level interpretation. The secret or mystical meaning of Torah verses. Symbolic cosmology. Discussions on the Sefirot, the divine name, and spiritual realms. Dialogues and parables. Insights offered in the form of riddles, dreams, and poetic discourse. The Zohar invites not just analysis, but contemplation. Its beauty is not in clarity, but in mystery. It teaches not through explanation, but by evoking wonder. In the words of the Zohar itself, woe to the man who says that the Torah comes to teach mere stories. Every word contains higher truths and supernal mysteries, core teachings of the Zohar 1. Everything is unity. At the heart of the Zohar is the radical affirmation of divine unity. All of creation is a manifestation of the One. Even multiplicity, even darkness, has its root in the infinite light, Ein Sof. The world is not separate from God, it is the garment through which God is revealed to. The 10 Sefirot is the divine body. The Zohar develops the Kabbalistic concept of the Sefirot, divine emanations, into a spiritual anatomy known as the Partsufim or faces of God. These are dynamic aspects of the divine that relate to each other like family members or soul attributes. By studying and meditating on the Sefirot, one comes to understand how God interacts with the world and with the soul 3. The Torah is a living organism. To the Zohar, the Torah is not merely a book, it is a spiritual organism, a living revelation of God's being. Each letter is a vibration of divine energy. The deeper one studies the Torah, the more one uncovers its hidden structure of light. The stories of the patriarchs and prophets are not just historical, they are mystical archetypes of the soul's journey for the role of the soul. The Zohar teaches that the human soul is a fragment of the divine. It undergoes many incarnations, Gilgal, to fulfill its mission of rectification, Tikkun. Life is not random but purposeful, every challenge is a spiritual opportunity, every encounter is meaningful. The soul's ultimate goal is devakut, cleaving to God. 5. Mystical union through love and prayer. The Zohar sees love as the highest spiritual force. When one loves their neighbor, performs acts of kindness, or prays with intention, they are not merely doing good, they are participating in the repair of the cosmos. The goal of prayer is not just to ask, it is to merge the lower world with the upper. The Zohar and the Messiah. One of the most intriguing aspects of the Zohar is its teachings about messianic redemption. Unlike political or militaristic expectations of the Messiah, the Zohar emphasizes spiritual awakening. It teaches that when enough souls are enlightened and enough sparks of holiness are gathered, the Shekinah, the feminine presence of God, will reunite fully with her divine source, ushering in an age of universal peace and divine clarity. To the Kabbalist, redemption is not imposed from above, it is drawn down by human action. Every act of consciousness, compassion, and connection helps to hasten the messianic era. Why the Zohar was hidden from the masses? For centuries, the Zohar was studied only by a spiritual elite. Not because of pride, but because of the risk it posed to the unprepared. Its ideas challenge conventional theology. Its symbols can be misunderstood. Its power can overwhelm those who seek only curiosity without humility. The Zohar itself warns, he who does not know how to navigate these waters may drown. It was intended for those with pure hearts, trained minds, and refined souls, those who sought not power, but truth. Christian parallels and reflections. To the Christian listener, many of the Zohar's teachings may sound surprisingly familiar. The concept of the word, logos, as divine vibration, the mystical union of the soul with God, the redemptive role of suffering, and the idea of hidden meanings in scripture all resonate with Christian mysticism. In fact, during the Renaissance, many Christian scholars such as Giovanni Pico della Mirandola and Johannes Reuchlin studied the Zohar, believing it held clues to the deeper truths of Christ's teachings. They saw Kabbalah not as heresy, but as a forgotten bridge between the old and new. However, the Zohar remains deeply Jewish in its spirit, rooted in the Hebrew language, the Torah, and the longing for the Shekinah's return. It is not meant to be appropriated but honored, not absorbed, but understood as the voice of a spiritual heritage that is both ancient and alive. Conclusion: the radiance still speaks. The Zohar is not an easy text. It is a path for the brave, the humble, and the awakened. Yet it offers a vision of reality that is luminous, interconnected, and filled with divine presence. To read the Zohar is to enter a world where every tree whispers Torah, every star sings the name of God, and every soul is a spark on its way back to the source. The Zohar has opened a gate. Let us now walk deeper into the sacred mysteries it reveals. Chapter 4. Ein Sof, the infinite God beyond knowing. In every tradition, mystics have reached the edge of language, where words can go no further, where thought surrenders to mystery. In Jewish mysticism, this point of surrender is called Ein Sof, meaning without end or infinite. It is the highest and most ineffable concept in Kabbalah, the understanding of God before all names, before creation, before thought, before time. Ein Sof is not a thing to be studied but a mystery to be contemplated. It is the unknowable root of all existence, the absolute and endless divine being from which everything emanates and into which all ultimately returns. The unspeakable source. Before anything existed, before light, angels, souls, or worlds, there was only Ein Sof. This is the divine state before God became a creator. Not a being among beings, not even being as we understand it. Ein Sof is pure, boundless, undifferentiated divine essence. No name can describe Ein Sof. Not Elohim, not Adonai, not even YHWH. These names refer to God as revealed, God in relationship with creation. But Ein Sof is God unrevealed. It is not male or female, light or dark, good or evil, it transcends all categories. The Kabbalist said, whatever you think God is, that is not God. In this way, Ein Sof is paradoxically both the closest reality and the furthest mystery. It is in everything and beyond everything. It is the divine presence that fills the world and the divine absence that cannot be contained. Tzimtzum, the great contraction. One of the most profound ideas in Kabbalah is how the infinite made space for the finite. If Ein Sof is all-encompassing, how can anything else exist? The answer lies in the concept of tzimtzum, which means contraction or withdrawal. According to the great 16th century Kabbalist Isaac Luria, the first act of creation was not expansion, but retraction. Ein Sof withdrew itself, so to speak, to create a conceptual vacated space in which a finite world could emerge. This was not a literal movement but a concealment of infinity, a doing of divine presence so that individuality, time, and matter could exist. This concealment was an act of love and restraint, a necessary illusion so that we might choose, grow, and return to the source freely. Thus, all of reality exists within this sacred absence, this womb of divine potential. The light of Ein Sof. After the initial contraction, a single ray of light, called the Kav, entered the void. This was the beginning of creation. This light, though limited compared to the full infinite radiance of Ein Sof, still carried divine essence. It passed through filters, vessels, and dimensions, gradually forming the worlds we know. The descent of light from Ein Sof to our physical world happens through a cascading series of realities known in Kabbalah as the Four Worlds. 1. Absolute, world of emanation, pure divinity, no separation. 2. Bariah, world of creation, divine thought and archetypes. 3. Yetzirah, world of formation, angelic and spiritual forces. 4. Asiyah, world of action, physical existence. Each world is a step further from the infinite, yet each one still radiates the hidden presence of Ein Sof. The physical world may seem furthest from God, yet it contains divine sparks awaiting reawakening. Ein Sof and the Sefirot. While Ein Sof is beyond form or structure, the process of emanation from Ein Sof flows through the Sefirot, 10 archetypal channels through which divine light is filtered into creation. The Sefirot are not separate from Ein Sof, nor are they fragments of God, they are modalities of divine expression, much like rays of light passing through stained glass. The Sefirot allow the infinite to become relational. Through them, we speak of God's love, chesed, judgment, gevurah, wisdom, chokmah, and so on. But behind all of these lies the unknowable Ein Sof, which is not reducible to any quality or image. Imagine a prism casting colors from invisible light. The colors are beautiful, meaningful, even divine, but the original light itself remains colorless, boundless, and hidden. That is Ein Sof. How do we relate to the infinite? Mystics have always grappled with this question: how can the finite connect with the infinite? For the Kabbalist, the answer is indirectly and with reverence. One does not attempt to grasp Ein Sof directly, for to do so would be spiritual arrogance and danger. Instead, the path is one of ascent through the Sefirot, through inner refinement, Torah study, prayer, and mitzvot, divine commandments. By aligning oneself with the flow of divine energy, the soul rises through the levels of creation toward its source. Some rare individuals, deep mystics, have touched glimpses of the infinite. They describe the experience not in terms of images, but in terms of dissolution, ecstasy, silence, and awe. The language breaks down. The I dissolves. Only being itself remains. Ein Sof and the Christian mystical parallel. Christians may find the idea of Ein Sof startling at first, an unknowable God beyond even the name God, yet this idea is not foreign to Christian mysticism. Think of the cloud of unknowing, the via negativa of the Desert Fathers, or Meister Eckhart's teaching of the Godhead beyond God. The Gospel of John describes the Logos, the divine word through whom all things were made, but also speaks of God whom no one has seen at any time. This hidden aspect of God, the infinite, uncontainable, invisible essence, resonates deeply with the Jewish concept of Ein Sof. Moreover, in the Christian mystic path, there is an emphasis on union through surrender, on unknowing as the highest form of knowledge. The infinite cannot be understood, but it can be entered through love, silence, and contemplative transformation. The humility of unknowing. The concept of Ein Sof teaches one of the most profound lessons in Jewish spirituality. True wisdom begins with awe. The infinite is not a puzzle to be solved, but a presence to be revered. It humbles the intellect, softens the ego, and opens the heart. The Zohar says, silence is the appropriate praise for the infinite. In the face of such mystery, we learn to pray not just with words, but with stillness. Not just with knowledge, but with wonder. And at that space of awe, something within us awakens, a spark that remembers the infinite light from which it came. Conclusion: living in the light of Ein Sof. To live with awareness of Ein Sof is to live differently. It is to walk through the world with reverence, for every person, every moment, every breath is a revelation in disguise. The infinite hides in the ordinary. The divine light is concealed in the mundane. To seek the infinite is to live a life of deeper seeing, deeper loving, deeper being. We do not need to reach the ends of the universe to touch Ein Sof. It is already here, within and around us. Hidden in plain sight. Calling the soul home. Chapter 5. The divine name and the power of Hebrew letters. At the heart of Jewish mysticism lies an extraordinary belief that language, especially Hebrew, is not just a tool for communication but a creative force embedded with spiritual power. The world was spoken into existence, and the letters of the Hebrew alphabet are not arbitrary symbols, but channels of divine energy, shaping and sustaining all that is. Among these sacred sounds and shapes, the divine name stands supreme. Known as the Tetragrammaton, YHWH, it is the holiest and most mysterious name of God, a name so sacred it is never pronounced. It is not merely a label for God, but a window into the very essence of being. The Hebrew alphabet, letters of light. The Hebrew alphabet consists of 22 letters, each with its own spiritual frequency, numeric value, gematria, symbolic meaning, and creative power. Unlike modern alphabets, where letters are linguistic tools, Hebrew letters are seen as living energies, the building blocks of all creation. The Sefirot, one of the oldest mystical texts in Judaism, teaches that God created the world through the 22 letters and the 10 Sefirot, together forming the 32 paths of wisdom. Each letter corresponds to forces in the soul, elements of nature, and spiritual archetypes. Let us examine a few key examples. Aleph, the silent letter, representing unity and the breath of life. Aleph is the beginning of the alphabet, yet it has no sound, symbolizing the hidden presence of God in all things. Bet, the letter that begins Bereshit, Genesis. It means house, representing duality, creation, and dwelling. Shin, a symbol of fire and divine energy, often associated with change, transformation, and the soul. Mem, representing water, the womb, and the flow of divine wisdom. Yod, the smallest letter, yet the most powerful. It represents the spark of creation and the divine point from which all things begin. Each letter is a vibrational key, and when arranged in sacred combinations, they form not just words, but spiritual doorways. The power of the divine name, YHWH. The most sacred name in all of Judaism is the Tetragrammaton, Yod, He, Vav, He. This name appears over 6,000 times in the Hebrew Bible, but its true pronunciation has been lost, or purposely hidden. In mystical tradition, this name is not read aloud. Instead, it is meditated upon, visualized, or substituted with the name Adonai, Lord, during prayer. For the mystic, it is not a word to speak, it is a name to enter. Each letter in the Tetragrammaton reveals a layer of divine reality, Yod, the spark of divine energy, the point of origin. He, breath and expansion, representing the world of form. Vav, a hook, symbolizing connection and divine flow between realms. He, repetition of breath, symbolizing reflection and return. Together, these letters form a cosmic formula that expresses the unity of time, past, was, present, is, and future, will be. That is why Exodus 3:14 describes God as, Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh, I am that I am, a dynamic expression of timeless being. Jewish mystics meditate on this name to reach states of devakut, cleaving to God. They visualize the letters, recite them silently, and allow their minds to ascend beyond duality, resting in pure being. Other divine names in Kabbalah. While YHWH is the highest, other sacred names also carry distinct spiritual functions. 1. Elohim. Often associated with judgment, power, and creation, Elohim is the name used in the opening chapter of Genesis. Mystically, it represents the hidden face of God, the force of limitation and differentiation too. Adonai. Substituted vocally for YHWH in reading scripture, Adonai means Lord and represents the divine presence in the lower worlds, God as accessible, immanent, and personal. 3. Ehyeh. I am, used by God in the burning bush encounter with Moses. This name represents pure being and becoming. It is linked to Keter, the highest of the Sefirot 4. El Shaddai. Meaning God Almighty, it also hints at divine nurturing. The name is traditionally inscribed on mezuzot and associated with protection and abundance. 5. Tzveot. Lord of Hosts, a name of divine might and spiritual armies. It represents the cosmic structure and order of all spiritual beings. Mystics would study, combine, and chant these names in sacred meditative rituals, known as Yechudim, unifications, to align their soul with the divine forces each name represented. Name meditation and mystical practice. The use of divine names and Hebrew letters was not merely theoretical, it formed the basis of intense spiritual disciplines. Kabbalists would spend hours meditating on combinations of letters, visualizing divine names in colored fire, sometimes focusing on the 72 names of God, derived from Exodus 14:19-21, an esoteric formula of 72 three-letter combinations. One such technique is letter permutation meditation, where the seeker focuses on 3 or 4 Hebrew letters, imagining them rotating, fusing, or expanding within their mind's eye. These practices aim to elevate consciousness, purify the inner being, facilitate spiritual ascent, receive divine insights or visions. Such practices were often guarded and only taught to initiates, due to the immense psychic power and danger of misapplication. The name and the Christian connection. Christians, too, are no strangers to the mystery of the name. The New Testament speaks of the power and the name of Jesus, Yeshua. In fact, the Hebrew name Yeshua is itself a fusion, containing the divine Yod and Shin, hinting at salvation and divine presence. In Philippians 2:9 and 10, it says, God exalted him and gave him the name that is above every name. This echoes the Jewish reverence for the divine name as a point of spiritual power, authority, and transformation. Moreover, Christian mystics like Origen, Gregory of Nyssa, and Meister Eckhart understood the power of sacred words and names. Prayer, for them, was not only communication, it was participation in divine energy. The name is a pathway to union. To the mystic, the divine name is not only a symbol, it is a pathway. Each name is a reflection of one aspect of God, and through it, the soul can rise, experience, and return. There is a story in the Talmud of a sage who knew how to utter the divine name in purity. When he spoke it, the angels trembled, and hidden truths were revealed. This is not superstition, it is the mystical understanding that when uttered in true spiritual alignment, words become worlds. Conclusion: the sacred science of letters and names. In the mystical vision of Judaism, speech is sacred, and names are holy. The Hebrew letters are not simply a script but a spiritual technology, keys to unlock the gates of consciousness and communion with the infinite. The divine name, especially the Tetragrammaton, is the most intimate self-expression of God, a revelation of the unpronounceable presence that sustains all being. To approach it is to walk upon holy ground. As we continue this journey through Jewish mysticism, we are reminded that to know the name is not merely to recite it, it is to become it. The goal is not knowledge, but transformation. To speak God's name in truth is to embody God's light in the world. Chapter 6. Angels, Souls, and the Spiritual Realms. In the mystical worldview of Judaism, reality is multi-layered. What we see with our physical eyes is only the outer crust of existence. Beneath and beyond it lie spiritual dimensions, angelic beings, and the eternal soul journey that connects the human with the divine. These are not mere poetic symbols, they are the living architecture of the invisible universe. The spiritual cosmos, the four worlds. Kabbalah outlines a vision of reality made up of four interconnected realms, known as the four worlds, Olamit, each one emanating from the infinite, Ein Sof, and serving as a bridge between the divine and the material. 1. Atzilut, emanation. The world of pure divinity, closest to Ein Sof. Here, the light of God is undivided. No separation exists between God and creation. 2. Bariah, creation. The world of divine thought, where the great archangels dwell. This realm gives birth to form and the spiritual blueprint of existence. 3. Yetzirah, formation. The realm of angels and emotional energies. It is the spiritual world most closely interacting with humanity. 4. Asiyah, action. The physical world, including both the visible and the spiritual aspects of the material realm. These worlds are not distant planets or places but dimensions of consciousness and vibrational frequency, existing within and around us. The soul journeys through these layers in both life and afterlife, ascending or descending based on spiritual alignment. The angelic hosts, messengers and ministers. In the Jewish mystical tradition, angels are not simply winged creatures singing hymns. They are intelligent forces of divine energy, each with a specific function, name, and frequency. The Hebrew word for angel, malach, literally means messenger. Angels are not independent agents but extensions of God's will, channels through which divine energy moves. Unlike in some Christian traditions, angels in Judaism are not worshipped or prayed to, they are respected as servants of the divine order. The angelic hierarchy includes archangels, great governing spirits assigned to cosmic domains. Michael, warrior and protector, associated with loving kindness. Gabriel, messenger of strength and divine judgment. Raphael, healer and guide of souls. Uriel, light bearer and revealer of hidden truths. Cheot HaKodesh, holy beasts. Fiery beings closest to God's throne, as described in Ezekiel's vision, representing pure divine energy. Seraphim, burning angels of pure praise, whose very existence is worship. Ophanim, wheels. Rotating intelligence is seen by Ezekiel, symbolic of cycles and spiritual propulsion. Each angelic being exists in alignment with a Sefirot, through which it channels divine attributes. For instance, Michael corresponds to Chesed, loving kindness, while Gabriel corresponds to Gevurah, judgment. The nature of the soul, 5 levels of consciousness. The Jewish mystical understanding of the soul, neshama, is complex and profound. The soul is not a simple, single entity, it is a multi-dimensional being composed of 5 levels. 1. Nefesh. The life force connected to the body. It drives instinct and basic vitality. 2. Ruach. The spirit or emotional self. It houses personality, character, and the moral compass. 3. Neshama. The higher soul, source of divine awareness and spiritual intuition. It transcends reason and gives access to mystical understanding. 4. Chair. The living essence, touching the eternal. Rarely accessed except in prophetic or ecstatic states. 5. Yechidah. The spark of pure oneness with God. This is the soul's most hidden and divine root, representing unity with Ein Sof. These levels are not merely philosophical ideas, they are experiential layers that one may encounter through deep meditation, righteous living, and mystical practice. Each level corresponds to a world in the 4 worlds and to a rung on the ladder of spiritual ascent. The journey of the soul, life, death, and beyond. In Jewish mysticism, death is not the end, it is a transition. The soul is eternal and continues its journey through various planes of existence. After death, the soul is judged, purified, and guided by angels into its next stage. There are several possibilities in the soul's post-mortem journey: Gan Eden, paradise, a realm of spiritual pleasure where the soul is reunited with divine light and loved ones in the spirit world. Jahannam, purgation, not eternal damnation, but a spiritual cleansing zone where the soul is refined of its impurities before ascending. Gilgal, reincarnation. Souls may return to earth in new bodies to complete unfinished tasks, rectify errors, or fulfill divine missions. This belief, particularly emphasized by the Kabbalists of Sefirot, was accepted widely in Jewish mystical circles. Olam Haba, the world to come. The ultimate reality of union with the divine, awaiting after the messianic age or cosmic transformation. The soul is seen as a spark of the divine light, temporarily clothed in flesh. Life is the training ground, the proving field for the soul to fulfill its tikkun, its rectification, its purpose. Angels and souls in interaction. In mystical thought, every human soul is assigned guardian angels, guides, and recorders. Angels accompany a person at birth, during prayer, in moments of moral decision, and at death. The Zohar speaks of angels created by our deeds, good or bad, who follow us and influence our path. Prayer, study, and mitzvot, divine commandments, create positive angelic forces, while transgressions give rise to forces of resistance. Thus, the mystic walks carefully, aware that every action affects the spiritual ecology. Moreover, when a soul prays or studies Torah with deep intent, kavanah, it may attract angelic presence, receive inspiration, or elevate to higher spiritual realms even while still in the body. The Christian overlap, shared and diverging visions. While Christianity inherited the concept of angels and the soul from Judaism, the mystical depth and multidimensional soul structure found in Kabbalah are often unfamiliar to most Christians. However, there are points of resonance. Christian mystics like Teresa of Avila, John of the Cross, and Hildegard of Bingen described multi-layered souls and angelic interactions. The idea of guardian angels, soul purification, and spiritual ascent through divine union echoes Jewish mystical teachings. The Apostle Paul spoke of being caught up to the third heaven, 2 Corinthians 12:2, which parallels the Jewish mystical idea of ascending through multiple heavenly realms. But unlike in much of Christian doctrine, Jewish mysticism emphasizes pre-existence, soul reincarnation, Gilgal, and a more dynamic role of angels as co-agents in cosmic transformation rather than simply messengers. Living in awareness of the unseen. To live with an understanding of the spiritual realms is to live with greater responsibility and deeper reverence. Every thought, every word, every act affects realms unseen. We are not isolated beings but souls connected to higher dimensions and divine beings who walk with us. The Jewish mystic does not seek visions or angelic encounters for their own sake but seeks to become aligned, a channel for divine light in this world. The goal is not to escape the physical but to elevate it, to reveal holiness in all things, and to fulfill the soul's sacred mission. Conclusion: the soul in the cosmic symphony. In the grand harmony of creation, the soul is a note in the divine symphony. Angels are instruments of order and mercy, and the spiritual realms are the invisible scaffolding of everything we see. To the mystic, life is not random, it is a sacred journey of return. Each step, each challenge, each encounter is part of the soul's climb back to its source. As the Zohar says, the soul descends to this world like a flame to kindle light, to transform darkness into brilliance. Chapter 7. The mystical Sabbath and sacred time. In the physical world, time marches on in relentless rhythm, seconds, minutes, hours, and days passing in mechanical sequence. But in Jewish mysticism, time is not linear. Time is alive, filled with spiritual energy, and certain moments are charged with divine presence more than others. Among these moments, the Sabbath, Shabbat, stands as the crown jewel of sacred time. It is more than a day of rest. It is a spiritual portal, a cosmic reset, and a taste of eternal union with the divine. To the mystics, Shabbos is not simply a ritual, it is a mystical ascent, a sacred romance between God and the soul, and a window into the hidden structure of time itself. Time in Jewish mysticism, more than a measure. In the mystical worldview, time is cyclical, not linear. Each week, month, and year carries a spiritual DNA, embedded with recurring opportunities for divine connection. Jewish mystics taught that the Hebrew calendar reflects the spiritual pulse of the universe. Days and festivals are not merely commemorations of past events, they are reactivations of divine forces unleashed at those times. Rosh Hashanah brings renewal and judgment. Passover releases freedom. Shavuos reopens divine revelation. Shabbos, however, is a weekly climax, the soul's return to its divine root. As the Zohar declares, all blessings flow from the Sabbath, Shabbos, the sanctuary in time. Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel called Shabbos a cathedral in time. In Jewish mysticism, this is not a metaphor, it is reality. Shabbos is a higher world temporarily descending into our world. When the sun sets on Friday, the lower worlds, Asura and Yetzirah, begin to dissolve their veil, and a higher state of divine energy emerges. The Shekinah, divine presence, is said to descend into every Jewish home that honors the Sabbath, and the soul is given an extra dimension, called the Neshama Yetzirah, additional soul. This additional soul enables a person to experience deeper joy and peace, perceive spiritual truths with more clarity, rest in union with the divine. Kabbalists describe Shabbos as a taste of Olam Haba, the world to come. On Shabbos, one doesn't merely rest from labor, one enters a different reality altogether. The cosmic union, Shabbos as divine marriage. One of the most powerful mystical teachings about Shabbos is its association with union, a sacred reunion between the masculine and feminine aspects of God, symbolized by the Sefirot of Tiferet and Malkut. Tiferet, beauty, symbolizes the upper male aspect, blessing and divine flow. Malkut, kingdom, symbolizes the feminine Shekinah, receiving and transmitting divine presence to the world. During the 6 weekdays, there is separation and struggle, a cosmic exile. But on Shabbos, the worlds are aligned, and the divine masculine and feminine embrace. This mystical marriage is enacted spiritually through Sabbath rituals, especially lighting of candles, welcoming the Shekinah. Kabbalah Shabbos prayers, receiving the Sabbath as a bride. Challah and wine, symbols of union and abundance. Intimacy between spouses, encouraged on Friday night, is seen as mirroring the divine union. In this way, human actions on Shabbos participate in repairing the universe, a mystical process known as tikkun. The soul's journey on Shabbos. The mystics taught that the soul ascends to higher realms on Shabbos. The additional soul brings clarity, insight, and emotional expansion. The limitations of the week dissolve, and the human being is reconnected to their original spiritual essence. Meditation on Shabbos is more powerful. Prayer becomes more direct. Study of Torah penetrates deeper mysteries. This is why traditional mystics, like the followers of the Ari, Isaac Luria, Ein Sof, would don white garments on Shabbos, symbolizing angelic purity. They saw themselves not just resting, but ascending to Atzilut, the world of divine emanation. Some mystics even spoke of Shabbos ecstasy, where the soul leaves the body and communes with angels. While this may sound extreme, the core idea is simple. Shabbos is not about doing less, but about being more, becoming fully present in divine time. The Shekinah and the feminine divine. One of the most beautiful aspects of Shabbos in Jewish mysticism is its feminine character. The Sabbath is called Shabbos HaMolka, the Sabbath Queen, and Kala, the bride. Every Friday night, Jews sing to her, welcome her, and stand to greet her with the famous hymn Lecha Dodi, Come, my beloved, to greet the bride. This ritual reflects a mystical belief that God's presence, personified as the Shekinah, descends to dwell among the people. She walks through the streets seeking homes that are spiritually prepared, entering those where peace, holiness, and light reside. In contrast to many Christian views that often emphasize a masculine God image, Jewish mysticism provides this feminine dimension of divinity, especially visible on Shabbos. This is a unique revelation, showing that divine intimacy is at the heart of spiritual life. Shabbos and the messianic future. According to Jewish mystical thought, Shabbos is not only a weekly experience, it is a prophetic foretaste to the world as it will be in the messianic age. The 6 days of the week represent the 6 millennia of human history, based on mystical readings of Genesis. The 7th day, Shabbos, represents the 7th millennium, an age of peace, harmony, and divine awareness. To observe Shabbos now is to live ahead of time, to embody the future in the present. It is a weekly rehearsal for the great cosmic Shabbos when all souls will rest in the light of the infinite. Shabbos' message to Christians in the world. For Christians, the Sabbath is often seen as a law fulfilled or a symbol superseded by Sunday worship. But the Jewish mystical understanding opens a deeper, timeless layer, that Shabbos is not a law to be fulfilled, it is a divine reality to be entered. It is a sacred space and time, an invitation to rest, renew, and experience union with God beyond dogma and form. Even for non-Jews, the principles of sacred time, silence, stillness, ritual, and return, are universal. In a world obsessed with production and consumption, Shabbos is revolutionary. It is a call to stop striving and start dwelling, to remember that we are not machines, but souls. Conclusion. Time as a temple. Jewish mysticism teaches us to build altars not only in space, but in time. Shabbos is the altar of time, the sacred fire that burns once a week, offering humanity a chance to come home to the divine. Each week, the cycle returns, and with it, the opportunity to realign, recenter, and reawaken. To observe Shabbos with mystic awareness is to glimpse eternity within time, to hear the silence between God's words, and to enter the eternal dance of soul and spirit. As the sages say, more than Israel has kept the Sabbath has kept Israel. Chapter 8. The Mystery of Evil, Understanding Satan and Suffering in Kabbalah. Evil is perhaps the most perplexing spiritual enigma in any faith tradition. Why does a good and omnipotent God allow evil to exist? Why do the righteous suffer, while the wicked often seem to thrive? These age-old questions have haunted both theologians and mystics for centuries. In Christian tradition, evil is often portrayed as a cosmic rebellion led by Satan, a fallen angel who wages war against God and his people. In Jewish mysticism, however, the view is far more nuanced and paradoxical. Evil is not a rival to God, it is a necessary aspect of the divine plan, permitted and sustained by the same infinite light that births goodness. To the Kabbalist, evil is not a mistake, it is a mystery, a shadow cast by light, a necessary veil in the unfolding drama of creation. In this chapter, we delve into the mystical teachings on Satan, the Sitra Achra, the other side, the purpose of suffering, and the cosmic process of tikkun, the rectification of brokenness. The paradox of evil in the divine plan. The foundational paradox of Jewish mysticism is this: God is one, and nothing exists outside of God. Therefore, even evil must have its root in the divine. But how can the source of goodness allow evil to emerge? The Kabbalists answer with layered subtlety. Before creation, all reality was filled with the infinite light, or Ein Sof. To make room for free will and differentiation, God performed Tzimtzum, a cosmic contraction, withdrawing his light to create space. In that vacuum, free will, imperfection, and potential separation arose. This spiritual vacuum allowed for the existence of the other side, known as the Sitra Achra, the mystical source of impurity and evil. Evil, then, is not a mistake, it is the inevitable consequence of a world where God hides his face to allow human beings to choose. The Sitra Achra, the other side. In Kabbalah, evil is not described merely as sin or immorality. It is an entire spiritual realm called the Sitra Achra, literally the other side. This realm is the inverse mirror of holiness, feeding parasitically off the divine sparks trapped within the material world. The Sitra Achra is populated by spiritual forces known as Klippot, husks or shells, layers of spiritual obstruction that conceal divine light. There are different levels, from neutral distractions to deeply toxic energies. Shedim, demons, beings formed from misdirected spiritual forces. Lilith and Samael, mythical figures representing aspects of sexual temptation, chaos, and spiritual death. These forces do not originate outside of God, but rather from the breakage of vessels. Sefirot HaKalim, a profound teaching in Lurianic Kabbalah. Sefirot HaKalim, the breaking of the vessels. According to Rabbi Isaac Luria, before the world as we know it could be sustained, divine light flowed into vessels meant to contain it. However, these vessels shattered under the intensity of the light, creating chaos, fragmentation, and the birth of evil. This event, Sefirot HaKalim, the breaking of the vessels, is the root of all imperfection. The divine sparks from these broken vessels scattered throughout creation and became trapped in realms of impurity, clippered. Thus, evil exists not as rebellion, but as the byproduct of broken light. Humanity's spiritual mission is to liberate the divine sparks through righteous living, prayer, and consciousness, what the Kabbalists call tikkun olam, repairing the world. Who is Satan in Jewish mysticism? Contrary to Christian belief, Satan in Judaism is not a fallen angel warring against God. He is a loyal servant, an agent of divine justice. The Hebrew term ha-Satan means the accuser or the adversary. His role is to test, challenge, and prosecute, not to rebel. As the book of Job reveals, Satan comes before God as part of the heavenly court. He tests Job's righteousness, but always under divine permission. In mystical terms, Satan is a refining fire, revealing what is impure so it can be purified. However, if humanity repeatedly chooses darkness, the Sitra Achra gains more strength. Satan and the Clippet thrive on misplaced energy, lust, anger, greed, despair, feeding off the spiritual sparks misused by human beings. The purpose of suffering in Kabbalah. Suffering, though painful, is never meaningless in the mystical view. It is often described as a form of spiritual cleansing for the soul. A rectification of past life errors, Gilgal, reincarnation. A catalyst for spiritual elevation. A test to refine faith and reveal hidden strength. The Zohar says that great light can only emerge from great darkness. Thus, suffering may conceal a divine invitation to ascend spiritually. It is not a punishment but a process of soul refinement, especially when endured with humility and awareness. Free will and the battle within. The struggle between good and evil is not external, it lives within each soul. The Yetzer Tov, good inclination, and Yetzer Hara, evil inclination, are two inner drives. The mystics view these as, the Yetzer Tov is the soul's yearning to return to God. The Yetzer Hara is the drive for separation and self-centeredness. The existence of evil allows for free will. Without temptation or resistance, there would be no merit in righteousness. Evil, then, becomes the scaffolding of virtue, it gives the soul something to overcome. Evil as catalyst for redemption. In one of the boldest Kabbalistic ideas, some sages suggested that even evil plays a role in redemption. The forces of the Sitra Achra will, in the end, be reabsorbed into divine oneness. Their temporary power is part of the cosmic drama. According to the Zohar, in the messianic era, the sparks trapped in darkness will be fully redeemed, and evil will be nullified by its own exhaustion, having served its purpose. As it is written, death shall be swallowed up forever. Isaiah 25:8. This does not excuse evil acts, it reframes them as opportunities for tikkun, as pieces of a puzzle we do not yet fully see. Practical lessons from the mystery of evil. Jewish mysticism does not offer simplistic answers to the problem of evil. Instead, it calls for conscious engagement with it, and provides practical mystical guidance. Transform your pain into prayer. Every cry reaches divine ears. Elevate fallen sparks by turning mistakes into growth. Fast from judgment, what appears as evil may conceal deeper mercy. Sanctify your desires. Even the Yetzer Hara can be redirected toward divine service. Choose light daily. Every act of goodness diminishes the power of the Clippet. Conclusion. Shadows are cast by light. Evil is real, painful, and complex. But in the mystical tradition, it is not an independent force. It is a shadow cast by divine light, existing so that free will, love, and growth can emerge. The task of the mystic is not to deny the darkness, but to walk through it bearing light, rescuing the holy sparks trapped within the chaos of the world, and within ourselves. As the Baal Shem Tov taught, a little bit of light pushes away much darkness. Chapter 9. Practical Mysticism, Jewish Meditation and Contemplation. In many Christian circles, mysticism is often considered the realm of monks, mystics, or ancient saints. Meditation, if discussed at all, is associated with Eastern religions. Yet within Judaism lies a rich, often hidden tradition of contemplative practice, spiritual disciplines designed not only for intellectual enlightenment but for direct communion with the divine. Jewish mysticism, especially in its Kabbalistic and Hasidic streams, offers a practical mystical path. It teaches that union with God is not just for prophets or sages but for any soul yearning to ascend. Through meditation, sacred speech, visualization, and inward focus, the mystic seeks to rise beyond the veil of illusion into intimate awareness of the divine presence, Shekinah. This chapter explores the practical tools and techniques of Jewish meditation, how they differ from other mystical traditions, and how these practices offer a direct experience of the hidden realities described in the Kabbalah. The goal of Jewish meditation. The aim of Jewish meditation is not to empty the mind or dissolve the self, as in some Eastern paths. Rather, it is to attach the soul to God, devocate, awaken the inner dimensions of the soul, refine moral character and perception, perceive spiritual truths hidden beneath material reality, facilitate inner transformation, not escape. As Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan wrote, meditation is not an end in itself, but a method of attaining prophecy, spiritual perception, and communion with the divine. Early roots, prophetic and temple meditation. Jewish meditation goes back to the biblical prophets, who entered altered states of consciousness through prayer, music, solitude, and divine visions. The prophets did not simply receive messages, they were seized by divine ecstasy, carried into higher realms. Later, Levites and priests in the temple engaged in meditative rituals, chanting divine names, offering incense, and synchronizing body and soul to serve as channels of divine presence. The mystics believed that even the structure of the temple symbolized the inner human being and could be used as a map for contemplative ascent into higher spiritual realms. Merkava meditation, ascent through the chariot. One of the earliest Jewish mystical systems is Merkava mysticism, named after the chariot seen in Ezekiel's vision. Practitioners used intense meditation to ascend through the 7 heavenly palaces, Hechelet, toward the divine throne. These meditations involved visualization of angelic guardians and celestial palaces, recitation of divine names and holy formulas, mental purification to withstand overwhelming divine light. The mystic was warned, only one pure of heart and mind may ascend. The journey could be dangerous. Many traditions warned of insanity or death if one approached the throne unprepared. While this path was reserved for an elite few, it laid the foundation for the contemplative ascent of the soul, a concept developed more fully in later Kabbalah. Kabbalistic meditation, divine names and the Sefirot. The Kabbalists refined meditation into a science of spiritual alignment. For them, every letter, word, and name in the Hebrew language contains spiritual DNA. Meditation on these holy words could restructure the soul and channel divine energy. Common Kabbalistic practices included Yichudim, unifications, meditative focus on unifying different names of God to restore cosmic harmony. Hidbonanet, deep contemplation of divine concepts, such as the Sefirot or the nature of Ein Sof. Letter permutations, Tserufim, visualizing Hebrew letters rearranged in sacred patterns to induce altered states of consciousness. Meditation on the Sefirot, focusing on each divine emanation, Chesed, Jevurah, Tiferet, etc., to bring balance to the soul and align with the divine will. The great mystic Abraham Abulafia developed a system of ecstatic meditation using breathing rhythms. mantric repetition of divine names, head and neck movements, visualization of Hebrew letters surrounded by light. Abu'l-Afir's goal was prophetic consciousness, a state where the mind and God become one. Hasidic contemplation, God is everywhere. With the rise of Hasidism in the 18th century, mysticism became more accessible to the common person. Rather than exclusive ascent to the heavens, Hasidic masters emphasized finding God in the here and now. Key Hasidic meditative principles include devakut, cleaving to God, remaining constantly aware of God's presence. Hitbodedut, a practice of solitude and spontaneous conversation with God, popularized by Rabbi Nachman of Breslov. It involves walking alone in nature and pouring out the heart freely to the Creator. Contemplative joy, transforming even mundane activities into acts of worship through mindfulness. Holy silence, listening to God within the stillness of one's own soul. Unlike the intense mystical ecstasies of earlier traditions, Hasidic meditation brought spiritual intimacy into daily life. The role of breath, intention, and speech. Breath, neshama in Hebrew, is closely related to the soul. Kabbalists taught that breath is the medium of spirit. Controlled breathing was used to calm the mind, align the heart and brain, elevate prayers into higher realms. Kavanah, intention, is also essential. The mystic does not merely speak or act, he imbues every moment with sacred awareness. A blessing over bread becomes a way to elevate sparks, and lighting candles becomes a doorway into higher consciousness. Even ordinary speech is seen as powerful. The mystic trains the lips to speak only what is true, pure, and holy. For words create spiritual realities. Comparing with Christian and Eastern meditation. Unlike Christian mysticism, which often emphasizes surrender, grace, and mystical union with Christ, Jewish mysticism emphasizes ascending through structured spiritual systems, aligning the soul with divine emanations, Sefirot, and transforming the world through inner purity. Compared to Eastern meditation, Jewish contemplation is less about dissolving the self and more about refining the self as a vessel for divine light. It is a relational mysticism, rooted in covenant and responsibility. Jewish meditation is also textual and linguistic, anchored in the sacredness of the Hebrew alphabet, scripture, and divine names. Words are not discarded in silence but sanctified through intention and sound. Practical meditation exercise, inspired by Jewish mysticism. Light of the Infinite Name 1. Find a quiet place and sit upright. Breathe slowly and evenly 2. Visualize the four-letter name of God, Yod He Vav He 3. With each inhale, silently say Yod. With each exhale, Hey. Continue, inhale Vav, exhale Hey. 4. Allow the name to radiate light from your heart. Let it expand until it fills your body, your room, your world. 5. Reflect, there is nothing but God, everything is an expression of the infinite. Remain in this awareness for 10 minutes, letting your mind rest in the divine presence. The fruits of contemplative practice. Through consistent meditation, the mystic begins to hear divine guidance within. Sense the unity beneath appearances. Respond to life with greater peace, compassion, and joy. See even suffering as part of a higher divine plan. Carry a living awareness of God into daily actions. This is practical mysticism, not retreat from the world, but transformation of the world from within. Conclusion: becoming a temple of the divine. Jewish meditation is not a departure from the world but a descent inward to ascend upward. It is a sacred technology for awakening, drawing down divine light, and becoming a living sanctuary for the infinite. As the Zohar teaches, wherever a person contemplates God's name, there the Shekinah rests. Chapter 10. Messianic Mysticism and the End of Days. Throughout Jewish history, the yearning for the Messiah has burned deeply in the soul of the Jewish people. Yet for the Jewish mystic, this hope is far more than political liberation or national restoration. It is the spiritual climax of creation itself, the culmination of cosmic rectification, the reunification of heaven and earth, and the complete unveiling of divine light in the world. In Christian theology, the Messiah is a person, Jesus Christ, who has already come and will return to fulfill final redemption. In Jewish mysticism, however, Messiah, Moshiach, is not only a future redeemer but also a cosmic force, a divine light woven into the very fabric of creation, awaiting activation and revelation through human and spiritual evolution. The two messiahs, Ben Yosef and Ben David. Kabbalistic tradition teaches that there are two aspects of the Messiah, Mashiach ben Yosef, Messiah, son of Joseph, a forerunner, a suffering servant who prepares the way through struggle, war, and spiritual battle. Mashiach ben David, Messiah, son of David, the final redeemer, king and healer, who establishes the eternal kingdom of peace and divine wisdom. The Zohar and other mystical texts explain that both are necessary. Ben Yosef represents the process, the painful purification of history. Ben David is the outcome, the revelation of unity and divine sovereignty. Some Kabbalists viewed historical figures through this dual lens. Moses, King David, and even Jesus of Nazareth have been interpreted by various streams as reflections of this dual messianic force, though mainstream Judaism does not accept Jesus as the Messiah. Tikkun HaOlam, the role of humanity in redemption. Unlike the passive waiting often associated with messianic hope, Jewish mysticism teaches that redemption is not only divine initiative but human partnership. Through the mystical work of Tikkun Olam, the spiritual repair of the world, each individual participates in hastening the coming of the Messiah. Tikkun involves elevating fallen sparks through mitzvot, holy deeds, purifying the inner world of the soul, aligning physical life with divine light, uplifting speech, thought, and intention to reflect God's holiness. Every act of kindness, every prayer spoken with deep intention, every moment of awareness contributes to the restoration of the cosmic order. The world is not waiting on a Messiah, it is waiting on us to become vessels worthy of revelation. The birth pangs of the Messiah, Chevleri Mashiach. The sages and mystics teach that before the arrival of the Messiah, the world will experience intense upheaval, known as Chevleri Mashiach, the birth pangs of the Messiah. These pangs may manifest as social collapse and moral confusion, war, plague, and natural disasters. A loss of faith, followed by spiritual awakening. Global crises that test the soul of humanity. The mystic sees these not as punishments but as labor pains, a painful but necessary clearing for new birth. Just as light shines brightest after the darkest night, so too will divine clarity follow global turmoil, resurrection, judgment, and the world to come. According to Jewish mystical sources, the Messianic age will unfold in stages: resurrection of the dead, Tchayat HaMetim, souls will be rejoined with purified bodies. Divine judgment, not merely legal judgment, but a full soul review where truth is revealed and purified. The world to come, Olam Haba, a reality where God's presence is fully manifest, and all of creation exists in harmony. In Kabbalah, this is described as the unification of the lower and upper worlds, the final integration of body and soul, matter and spirit, justice and mercy. Some mystics go further, saying that the soul of every human being, Jew and Gentile, is destined to participate in this transformation, for the spark of the divine is in all. The Shekinah and the exile of the divine feminine. A central mystical concept tied to redemption is the Shekinah, the feminine presence of God. The Shekinah is seen as being in exile along with the Jewish people and humanity at large, hidden and wounded by sin, distortion, and separation. Redemption, in mystical terms, means the reunification of the Shekinah with her divine source. The return of balance between masculine and feminine energies. The lifting of the veil between the spiritual and physical realms. When this occurs, the world will no longer be divided or estranged from its source. Instead, the entire cosmos will be a dwelling place for the infinite. Messianic consciousness, the redemption of perception. The mystics teach that the Messianic age is not just an event, but a shift in consciousness, what the sages call Da'at Elyon, or supernal knowledge. When the Messiah is revealed, humanity will no longer perceive division, conflict, or ego as real. Instead, God will be seen as the only true existence. The illusion of separation will vanish. The knowledge of God will fill the earth as the waters cover the sea. Isaiah 11:9. Thus, redemption begins not with global events, but with personal awakening, the choice to see with the eye of the soul. Signs of the messianic era in our time. Many Jewish mystics have pointed to signs in our own generation as evidence that we may be nearing the threshold of redemption, global connectivity in the breakdown of boundaries, a form of unity, a return to ancient spirituality and Torah learning, the awakening of interest in mysticism across all faiths, the re-establishment of the land of Israel, a surge of global chaos, mirrored by deep spiritual hunger. In Kabbalah, the darkest hour precedes the dawn, and many believe we are living in the twilight moments before sunrise. The tools for redemption are already in our hands: awareness, prayer, compassion, and consciousness. The final secret: redemption from within. The deepest mystical teaching of all may be this: the Messiah is not only a person. The Messiah is within you. The Baal Shem Tov taught that every soul has a spark of the Messiah, and that inner transformation precedes global salvation. When you choose to live with love, truth, and divine awareness, you awaken the messianic light in yourself, and in the world. Thus, redemption is both cosmic and intimate, historical and deeply personal. The question is not only when will the Messiah come, but am I ready to host the divine within? Conclusion: the light at the end of all things. The mystics have always looked beyond the surface of time, space, and suffering. They see in the chaos of the present a divine symphony yet unfinished. They know that evil, exile, and ignorance are temporary, but the light of the infinite is eternal. Redemption, in Jewish mysticism, is not just about a hero who will come to save the world. It is about the awakening of divine presence in every soul, and the unveiling of a world bathed in holy light. In the words of the Zohar, in the days of the Messiah, the earth shall shine with the hidden light of creation, and all shall see that God is one, and his name is one. Chapter 11. Christianity and Jewish Mysticism, Hidden Connections. At first glance, Christianity and Jewish mysticism may appear as two distinct spiritual traditions, one centered on the person of Jesus Christ, the other veiled in the symbolic language of the Kabbalah and esoteric Torah. Yet beneath the surface lies a mystical thread, a hidden bridge of shared symbols, visions, and spiritual aspirations. Christianity was born in the soil of Jewish thought, and while it evolved into a separate religious system, many of its deepest spiritual teachings echo ancient Jewish mystical ideas, some directly, others through transformation. Let us turn our focus to the overlapping concepts between Christian spirituality and Jewish mysticism, the influences of the Kabbalah on Christian mystics, and the enduring spiritual insights that both traditions carry into the modern world. Jesus and the mystical tradition of Israel. To understand the mystical connections, we must begin with Jesus himself. Jesus of Nazareth lived, taught, and worshipped as a Jew. His parables, prayers, and ethical teachings were rooted in Torah. But many scholars and mystics argue that Jesus was not merely a teacher of law, but also a man deeply immersed in the hidden dimension of divine truth, what Jewish mystics call Sod, the secret level. Consider the following elements of Jesus' ministry: unity with the Father. I and the Father are one. John 10:30 reflects the mystical ideal of devekut, clinging to God until no separation remains. Inner kingdom. Jesus spoke of the kingdom of God being within you, a concept mirroring the mystical truth that the divine spark resides in the human soul. Healing through intention and word. In Jewish mysticism, especially in the tradition of the Baal Shem Tov, words, intentions, and divine names hold the power to alter reality, just as Jesus healed through prayer and proclamation. Transfiguration and resurrection. These can be understood through the lens of Kabbalistic transformation, where the soul ascends into higher realms and the body is refined into light. Though Christianity would later separate Jesus from his Jewish roots, many of his teachings resonate with the mystical understanding of God's immanent and inner transformation. The Tree of Life and the Cross, symbols of divine mediation. One of the most striking symbolic parallels lies between the Tree of Life, Etz Chaim, in Kabbalah and the cross in Christian mysticism. The Tree of Life represents the Sefirot, the divine attributes or emanations through which the infinite reveals himself and interacts with the world. The cross, in mystical Christianity, is also a cosmic symbol, not just of suffering but of the reconciliation of opposites, heaven and earth, spirit and flesh, divine and human. Both are spiritual maps. The tree of life maps the descent and ascent of divine light. The cross becomes the axis through which salvation and unity are achieved. In both, the human soul must journey through sacrifice, death to ego, and resurrection of the inner being to attain divine union. Christian mystics and Kabbalistic influence. As early as the Middle Ages, Christian mystics and theologians encountered the teachings of the Kabbalah, and some embraced them as keys to unlocking the deeper meanings of Scripture and Christ. Notable connections include Giovanni Pico della Mirandola, 15th century, a Christian humanist, believed that Kabbalah contained ancient wisdom that supported Christian truth. He even said that no science yields greater proof of the divinity of Christ than Jewish Kabbalah. Renaissance Christian Kabbalists like Johannes Reuchlin and Athanasius Kircher saw in the Sefirot a reflection of the Trinity, and interpreted Ein Sof, the infinite, as the hidden father of all creation. Mystics like Meister Eckhart, though not Kabbalists, echoed similar themes: the birth of God in the soul, the annihilation of the self, and the deep silence where God is encountered. While Christian use of Kabbalah was often controversial, and sometimes superficial, it reveals the mystical hunger across traditions to understand the divine mystery beyond the surface of doctrine. Divine union and the role of the soul. Both Christian and Jewish mysticism share a central goal: union with the divine. In Jewish Kabbalah, the soul seeks to ascend through the Sefirot and achieve devekut, clinging to God. In Christian mysticism, saints like John of the Cross and Teresa of Avila speak of the dark night of the soul and the spiritual marriage, culminating in divine union. Each tradition uses its own language, but both point to the same inner reality: the purification of desire, the burning away of ego, the transformation of suffering into illumination. The soul as the bride longing for union with the beloved. In both, love is the highest force, not sentiment, but fiery devotion that consumes everything in its path until only God remains. Hidden wisdom in the New Testament. Many Christian scholars have noted that New Testament writings contain mystical layers that align with Jewish esoteric teachings. The Logos, John 1:1, as the divine word parallels the Memra in Jewish mystical thought, a personified aspect of God's creative speech. The Apostle Paul's teaching on the third heaven reflects the mystical ascent of the soul through multiple spiritual realms, similar to Merkava mysticism. The vision of Revelation is rich with symbols found in the prophetic books and later Kabbalistic visions: fire, eyes, angels, divine thrones, and heavenly scrolls. Such patterns suggest that early Christianity was far more mystically infused than is often acknowledged today, and deeply rooted in Jewish visionary traditions. Points of tension and divergence. While there are many resonances, there are also sharp theological divergences between Jewish mysticism and Christianity. Incarnation. Christianity centers on God becoming flesh and Jesus. Jewish mysticism views the infinite as beyond form, though manifesting divine light in creation. Trinity. Kabbalah speaks of many divine attributes, Sefirot, but insists on absolute divine unity, rejecting any division in the essence of God. Redemption. Christianity teaches that redemption was accomplished through Christ's sacrifice. Jewish mysticism emphasizes a participatory process, where each soul helps bring about cosmic redemption through spiritual deeds. Still, these differences do not erase the underlying spiritual kinship between the traditions, a kinship often obscured by centuries of polemic and misunderstanding. A shared vision of transformation. Despite theological differences, Jewish mysticism and Christian spirituality share a common mystical vision, that the world is more than it appears. That God is not only above us but within us. That the soul was made for union, not separation. That love, suffering, and contemplation are gateways to high realities. That history is moving toward a final unveiling, a restoration of the divine image in all creation. In the age of spiritual renewal and interfaith understanding, These shared truths invite us not to compromise doctrine, but to listen deeply, to honor the wisdom hidden in the sacred silence beneath words. Conclusion: the unseen bridge. Jewish mysticism and Christianity, when seen through mystical eyes, are not rivals but echoes of a deeper truth. Each carries part of the divine mystery. Each has preserved sparks of the hidden light scattered at the beginning of time. As we approach the end of days, perhaps the veil between traditions will lift, and what once seemed divided will be seen as a single river flowing from the same divine source. Chapter 12. Controversies, Caution, and the Sacred Veil. Jewish mysticism, though radiant with spiritual depth, has never been without controversy. From rabbinic disputes to cultural misunderstandings, from accusations of heresy to concerns of spiritual danger, the mystical path within Judaism has always been carefully guarded by the sages. Unlike open theology meant for communal study, Jewish mysticism, particularly Kabbalah, has traditionally been concealed, protected under a sacred veil, accessible only to the spiritually mature, the morally refined, and the reverently cautious. Why? Because the mystical realm is both powerful and perilous. What opens the gates of divine illumination for one, may plunge another into confusion, delusion, or even madness. This chapter serves as a necessary grounding, to honor the sacred caution of a tradition, to explore the controversies surrounding Jewish mysticism, and to understand the ethical framework required to engage with this hidden dimension responsibly. Why the veil? The case for secrecy. From ancient times, Jewish mysticism was transmitted orally, often in private circles, and only to students over the age of 40 who were well versed in Torah, Talmud, and personal character development. The rabbis warned against exposing the masses to mystical speculation because of the risk of theological confusion, misunderstanding symbolic language as literal truth, spiritual arrogance, mistaking mystical knowledge for superiority, idolatry, projecting personal fantasies onto God's image, psychological instability. Mystical practices can open deep inner chambers, including unresolved trauma and altered states of consciousness. The Talmudic tale of the four who entered the paths, the orchard, is often cited as a cautionary parable. Four entered the mystical orchard, Ben Azai died, Ben Zoma went mad, Acca became a heretic, and only Rabbi Akiva entered in peace and left in peace. Mysticism, then, is not entertainment, nor intellectual pursuit alone. It is fire, and like fire, it must be handled with reverence and skill. Rabbinic resistance and the heresy accusations. Even within the Jewish world, mysticism has sparked fierce controversy and rejection, especially among rationalist scholars and legalists. Maimonides, Rambam, the great 12th century philosopher, was deeply wary of mysticism. He emphasized divine simplicity and rational theology, seeing mystical speculation as dangerous to the unity of God. During the Spanish Inquisition and exile, some Jewish leaders blamed the spread of mystical thought for social instability and messianic hysteria. The emergence of false messiahs, such as Shabbat Tzvi, who used Kabbalistic language to seduce and mislead thousands, further discredited mysticism in the eyes of many. Even today, some Orthodox authorities caution against public Kabbalah study, especially the kind commercialized or distorted for mass consumption. Christian misappropriation and distortion. Jewish mysticism has also been misunderstood and misused by outsiders, especially in the Christian and esoteric worlds. Renaissance Christian Kabbalists sought to reinterpret Kabbalah to support Christian theology, often distorting core Jewish concepts in the process. In the modern era, New Age movements, occult circles, and celebrity-driven Kabbalah centers have taken mystical teachings out of context, reducing sacred symbols to magical tools or self-help tricks. Terms like Tree of Life, Sefirot, or Ein Sof are sometimes used without understanding their deep ethical, halakhic, and theological roots. This has led many traditional Jewish authorities to condemn such appropriations as spiritual theft, not because wisdom should not be shared, but because sacred teachings must be treated with integrity. Mysticism without mitzvot, the danger of disconnection. One of the greatest concerns in Jewish mystical thought is separation from halakha, Jewish law. The Kabbalists never intended for mysticism to replace the Torah's commandments. In fact, the mitzvot are seen as the very vessels through which divine light flows. To practice Kabbalah without grounding in moral and spiritual discipline is like channeling lightning with no grounding wire. Prayer, Shabbat, charity, ethical speech, and study of Torah are not optional, they are the foundation of mystical experience. The Zohar teaches that without purity of heart and deed, mystical knowledge becomes spiritually dangerous, even deadly. Thus, the great mystics were always also great sages of law and character. They did not seek spiritual experiences alone but revered God with awe, humility, and obedience. False mysticism and spiritual egotism. Another caution in this path is the illusion of enlightenment, believing one has attained divine wisdom or supernatural power. Jewish mysticism warns against seeking visions or voices for their own sake, using divine names or rituals for control or manipulation, claiming spiritual superiority based on mystical knowledge. The Baal Shem Tov and other Hasidic masters taught that true mysticism led to greater humility, not pride. The more one draws near to the infinite, the more one becomes aware of their own smallness and need for compassion. Mystical knowledge without humility becomes sorcery, and the sages condemned any attempt to use God's names for personal gain or glory. The problem of universalization, is it for everyone? In today's world of open access and global spirituality, many ask, should Jewish mysticism be shared with non-Jews, or even with Jews who are not observant? Some argue that the age of secrecy is over, and humanity is ready for the deep truths of the soul. Mystical teachings can help all people awaken spiritual consciousness and ethical living. Others warn that, without proper foundation, mystical exposure can mislead or confuse. Cultural appropriation without context can harm both the teachings and the learner. Mysticism without a covenantal framework may lose its moral compass. The balance lies in wise discernment, sharing light without casting pearls into the mud, opening the gates of wisdom while protecting the sacredness of the path. Proceeding with purity, the right way to approach mysticism. For those who feel drawn to the hidden dimension of Torah, Jewish tradition offers a path of preparation and purity. Begin with ethical self-refinement, mussar, honesty, humility, compassion. Study Torah and Talmud, to ground mystical insights in the revealed word. Engage in regular prayer and mitzvot, to open the soul to divine flow. Learn from reputable teachers and authentic texts, not from internet mystics or commercial gurus. Seek community and accountability. Mysticism should not be pursued in isolation. Above all, remember, the goal of Jewish mysticism is not power, but presence. Not escape from the world, but elevation of it. Not secret knowledge, but sacred connection. Conclusion: guarding the flame. Jewish mysticism is a sacred fire passed down from generation to generation, not to dazzle or impress, but to purify, awaken, and unite. The controversies, cautions, and criticisms are not signs of weakness, they are the guardrails around the Holy of Holies. They remind us that this path is not entertainment. It is a covenant. It is holy ground. To those who approach with reverence, humility, and love, the veil begins to lift. The hidden light reveals itself not in thunder, but in stillness. Not in spectacle, but in service. As the Zohar says, woe to those who see only the garment, for the garment is not the Torah. The wise see through the garment into the soul of the Torah, which is the Shekinah. Let us be among the wise. Epilogue. The call to the depths. There is a longing within every soul, a quiet ache, a divine whisper that speaks not in words but in yearning. It is the call to the depths. The call to know what lies beyond the surface of religion, beyond the rules and rituals, beyond the divisions of denominations. It is the call to the inner chamber of God's heart. Jewish mysticism, veiled in symbol, steeped in silence, and wrapped in holiness, is one such pathway into that depth. It is not a system of secret knowledge for the elite. It is a sacred language for those who are willing to see beyond the veil, to walk in awe, and to surrender the mind to the majesty of the infinite. For Christians who have only known Judaism through the lens of law, prophecy, or history, this journey opens a new dimension. It reveals that within Judaism is not only a record of God's commands, but also a map of the soul's ascent, a symphony of light, and a mystical romance between the Creator and His creation. From the Ein Sof, the infinite beyond comprehension, to the Sefirot, the divine expressions of God's inner life, to the Merkava, the chariot of ascending vision, and the sacred Sabbath as a window into eternity, Jewish mysticism offers not just information but transformation. It invites us to see the world as alive with divine sparks. Treat every moment as an opportunity for connection. Engage the sacred texts not just as commandments, but as gateways to presence. Approach prayer not as obligation, but as mystical union. Live not just ethically, but consciously, as partners in repairing the cosmos. But this path is not without cost. It demands humility. It requires inner purification, a breaking down of ego, and a rising into love. It is not for those who seek control. It is for those who seek truth, truth that breaks, heals, and restores. In an age of noise and distraction, where religion is often reduced to politics or performance, the mystical path calls us to return to the still point at the center of the soul where God speaks, not in thunder, but in whisper. To remember that the goal of all spiritual life is union. And to know that the divine is not far, but nearer than your next breath. This is the hidden side of Judaism. Not hidden to exclude, but hidden to protect. Not secret to elevate the few, but sacred to prepare the heart. And now, that sacred whisper calls to you. Will you respond? Deep calls to deep, Psalm 42. 7.